All right. Hello, hello. I am live. I hope I'm live on all the platforms. Uh, Welcome back to Tips for Confident Norwegian. I'm really, really happy I made it. I'm back here. I'm planning on doing this every Wednesday now, like before. It took me such a long time to pick up after the summer break because I got this weird cough and I was just coughing every time I tried to speak straight for more than 2 minutes. It's much better now, so hopefully I will manage. If I don't, I prepared some chewing gum, so sorry about that in advance. But I think I'll manage, and I have such a lot of things that I want to tell you. There's been so much happening. I have opened a new run of Speak Norwegian with Confidence. We've had a week and a half almost, so the first week is behind us. It's a very nice group that's so motivated, and I just love starting courses. It's a lot of work, of course, so I haven't been that visible lately, but it's such a great thing to welcome new students and to start up the processes. So, and I also ran this free master class, Master Norwegian Fast, that people loved. So I'm really looking forward to the next one. I will let you know when I'm opening something new that's for free for a broad audience. All right, and today's topic, I was promising a pep talk, and here it comes. It's about this feeling that Norwegian it's impossibly difficult. It is difficult, arguably. Yeah, Norwegian is not the easiest language for most of us, but sometimes some people tell me, like it feels so hard. I don't even know how I'll be able to tackle this. Like, what should I do? And you see that they really, really don't believe that they could tackle it even. They're just kind of living in that belief that they couldn't. Yeah. And it's crushing them in a way. And this happens quite so often to me, especially, and I know I really do not have a good sample because people who approach me are people who struggle because that's what I'm here to be fixing, right? So I invite people to approach me if they struggle. So that means that the percentage is probably somewhere else than what I get to see. But still, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people who feel that, you know, this like English, for example, was difficult, but this Norwegian thing, it's impossibly difficult, really. And I want to talk about this from a different angle than it's usually discussed. Because usually, if you complain about something like that in a Facebook group or whatnot, people will tell you about the comparative complexity of Norwegian versus German versus Chinese versus English versus Spanish, right? But that's really not the case with most of these students. It's not about the complexity of the grammar as such. Typically, when I dig into it and I talk to people, I see it's about the mindset and the belief system under it. And that's what I talk a lot about. I talked about it in this last free program. I talk about it basically in every free program I run because it's so difficult. Or so difficult. It's so important. It's difficult to overcome and to spot it as well. And I talk about it repeatedly on this live stream because yeah, that's just the basis. It's the most important thing that there is, right? And I see this getting kind of becoming off, yeah, so often. And then people still think it's about the grammar, it's about the complexity, it's about the vocabulary strategies, when under all of that underlying, people don't believe that they can do it. Yeah. Oh, hello, hello. Let me see. Hello, Tammy. Very nice to see you. So good to have you back. I'm really happy I'm back with the live stream and I'm happy to see you. All right. So I advertised when I was talking about this live stream, and I also sent out an email about it. And when I was doing that, I was describing all these memes that we are flooded with on socials and the implications that these have for your learning processes. And this is a very interesting thing that I don't think many of you have thought of. So I want to pick this up, and I really don't want you to take from this that you should never ever look at these memes again. I just want to offer the perspective to you so that you can judge for yourself, right? And you can have a different mindset when approaching them. All right. So I have picked 3 examples of these memes. And the first one that I was describing in the invitation is this picture of this man crying like a baby, right? And the text goes like, when somebody tells you that du snakker bra norsk, right? And like the emotion there is like gratefulness and like finally somebody validated me, right? This kind of emotions. And this is a little problematic in terms of your own agency, right? And I see why this is funny. I can like these memes as well. I'm not saying don't like them again or don't look at them, but I just want you to see that, if you see something like that and you're like, oh my God, that's me. I feel like that all the time. I'm a member, sign me up for this community of people who start crying when a random Norwegian tells them like du snakker bra norsk, right? All right. Now I have a lot of students as well who struggle with the feeling of like feeling a little childish when they get the feedback like du snakker bra norsk, yeah? And sometimes typically this feedback is well meant. Of course it is, right? But sometimes the thing that it does, rather than kind of pulling you up or rather than praising you in a way, it kind of reestablishes or confirms that there is a gap, right? Like, I am here to evaluate your Norwegian. You're here to try your hardest and fail and fail and fail. And I'm gonna tell you, like, oh, bra jobba, right? So sometimes people feel that, this is condescending when somebody talks to them, and then instead of focusing on what they are saying, they're like, oh, du snakker bra norsk. And it really, really, really depends on the intonation and how this is said. And I really don't think anybody means this in a condescending fashion. But I've met this, right? And then people feel bad about feeling bad about it, if you know what I mean. This becomes a little meta, but I think you know what I mean. That somebody tells like, oh, du snakker bra norsk, and you're like, suddenly I feel like a little kid that, like, oh, you tidied your room, well done, and I wasn't expecting you to. And I should be grateful because like this person just praised me or whatever, like what do I want? So people struggle with this emotional meta thing within themselves. And that's that, yeah. And of course, if you know what I'm talking about, then when you see a meme like that, all of this would get activated, right? And it is so relatable, of course, because typically especially if we are used to negative feedback only, like wrong, 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 right? We would be grateful for this kind of positive feedback, for this validation, and we do need to hear it. We do need to hear that we are doing well, right? It just depends on like who and in which situation gives that to us. But the point, I guess, that I'm trying to get across with this particular meme, or it's not just the one, right? It's the kind, it's like a genre of memes, is that funny as it is, it kind of puts you in that position of like, I am here to like ask somebody to validate me. Like when they validate me, I'll be like, oh, thank you, right? I'm crying with gratefulness. So I'm not sure if I'm getting it across the way I mean it, but you can let me know in the comments if this is understandable. But the point is, the more of these memes that you like and that you share and that you like, oh, this is me, right? The more you become it. And the question is, when your goal is to build your agency in your learning processes, to be the boss of your process, to learn to speak Norwegian with that confidence, which is what students come to me for, I'm not sure if identifying with that role, identifying with that identity, right? If that's the most useful thing for you, if you want to become that confident speaker. and rely on your own judgments, rely on your own strategies that you have acquired and learned, right? Relying on your own feedback loops as well. This is what I teach a lot about, and what I try to lead students to always is to the bulk of the feedbacking that you are getting is your own linguistic awareness that you are building, right? So basically, whether or not somebody tells you that du snakker bra norsk, right? It shouldn't be news for you, right? You should kind of know, like, I'm doing this right, but not this. This is my potential for growth, but like, you should kind of know where you are. Many people don't know. And instead of figuring that out and empowering themselves to that, they're like, oh, if only somebody told me that I was good or I was doing well on something, right? And typically the person telling you that's their subjective view, and it doesn't actually say anything about where you are in the process. It's just that they liked you, so you are kind of depending on them for that. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. And again, I'm not saying do not like these memes or never ever look at the profiles of the creators who share these memes. I have I have great respect for all the creators that put useful or funny content out there in terms of Norwegian. I know what it takes. I'm a content creator myself. I know this is not for free, and I do appreciate funny memes. I just want you to have this perspective and to question these things, because if you resonate with something, there are chances that it touches your belief system somewhere, that this is something that you are in agreement with. And you should always question, like, is this a good thing, or is this maybe a bad thing, or not even a bad thing, but a not useful thing, right? So that's what I offer here with this one. Now I have another case for you that I want to dissect today. And that's these reels. And again, like, reels follow trends and they come and go. So it will be gone in a year, maybe, I don't know. But this has been a popular one. And it's this one where you pick something from the language that is really hard if you put it all together. So maybe you have something like homonyms. Now, homonyms sorry, are words that sound the same or are even spelled the same, but they mean something different. And we have them in all languages. This is nothing special for Norwegian. But when you put all of them next to each other, it looks really, really hard. In reality, they never ever meet, right? So while these reels are funny, they are creating and putting into your head a completely artificial problem that you wouldn't have arrived at. Here comes my cough, I'm sorry. And that native speakers never ever think of, right? Because it's so artificial. So there is this one reel that I saw lately where a guy is like, how do you say have known in Norwegian? And then the other guy, which is the same guy, right, with a filter, says like, jeg har visst. And then he's like, oh, good, writing it down. And how do you say apparently in Norwegian? Like, the two of them have anything in common, right? And the other guy is like, visst. And he's like, okay. And then so it goes on until this student, right, the one acting the student, gets totally desperate. And the point is like, I can't learn this language because it's so difficult, right? So again, this one, funny, I get it. I like this kind of stuff, actually. I do appreciate the acting that the creators put into this, and it takes a lot of kind of time as well to put the script together, because like, actually looking up all of these homonyms, it takes time, because you don't have the list in your head, especially not as a native speaker. So that's why I say that these are completely artificial, kind of constructed problems that are constructed for the sake of the joke. But when you look at it, what it can do to you, you can be like, yeah, he's right, this is hopeless, right? And if you have this belief that you can't do it and that it's hopeless from before, And then you're like, oh, Jesus. So that's like another piece of evidence for you, right? That you can't do it. Yay. And that's not good for you, is it? So the thing is, if you really want to improve your Norwegian, if you really want to fix it, if you really want to start speaking with that confidence, you should get rid of these things. Not like completely, but not maybe not identifying with them or seeing them for what they are. They are funny reels, right? And it is funny, it is uplifting sometimes, and it's like, wow, the language is like, it has these tenets and like you can play on it. This is actually beautiful. That's a good use of that reel, of that piece of content. If you're like, oh my God, I can never learn this, if it makes you feel like that, maybe you should take a break from these things, right? Or at least maybe not to identify with them overly by liking them or sharing them with others, right? And again, nothing against these creators, they mean well. And also the Instagram algorithm really pushes funny memes above the other kind of content. So I get it on all levels. But when you approach this, make sure that you're the boss and that you don't jump on the narrative of like Norwegian is more difficult than other languages because it has homonyms. All languages have these homonyms. Your language has them, and some of them you know about because maybe there is a spelling thing that like it's not spelled the same, but it's pronounced the same, so you have to take care. Or maybe you learn some of them as examples at school in your first language classes. But otherwise, all the other ones, especially the ones that include some random grammatical forms of verbs like jeg har visst versus some adverbs or whatever else, you typically don't know about these in your own language, right? And then when somebody points them out to you, you're like, oh, this language is more difficult than the other languages because it has so many homonyms. No, it doesn't. It's like Norwegian has the normal amount of homonyms for a European language. Like there is nothing in particular special about Norwegian, right? So that's that. Now another one that I saw just today, pronunciation memes, yeah? Now Norwegian pronunciation has its tenets. I like to teach pronunciation. I teach it, like, for example, in Speak Norwegian with Confidence, we have this big section towards the end of the course about pronunciation. I help people improve their pronunciation. But what is not useful in teaching pronunciation is pointing out all the exceptions next to each other, right? And again, it makes a funny reel. But then people watch it and they get desperate. So if you like, oh my God, yeah, this is actually funny. Or maybe if you watch a reel like that puts all of these pronunciation irregularities next to each other, and then the students are crying at the end, right? Because that's what the genre kind of dictates as the point. Then if you maybe use it to your advantage and you're like, oh, funny one, I like it. So you can ride on the wave of the emotion. That's good for your learning. And you pick one of them. You can't learn all of them in the scope of one reel, but you can pick one of them and be like, I'm going to learn this one. You can remember it, yeah, because it's more memorable because it was funny and they were making these funny faces and whatever. That's a good use, right? So you can still consume your favorite creators' content and you can have fun and you can like it and you can profit. You can learn something from it. But if you let yourself overwhelm by the complexity of the whole business, then it's not good for you. And again, it's perpetuating this original belief of yours that Norwegian was impossibly difficult, right? Because that's the point of the meme. Like, this language, I don't think I'll ever learn it because it's so difficult. Now, telling yourself that you can't do it is a lie. Telling yourself that Norwegian is an easy language is also a lie. But which of these two lies is a better one for you, right? Which one do you pick? Many people believe that like it's impossibly difficult is the truth. That's not the truth. That's something you believe. So if you think that it's easy, that's also a lie, but it's a much better one, right? Yeah. So there are some psychologists out there that I follow on socials that have this as a slogan. They say like, choose the better lie, right? All of these ideas, if you formulate anything like that without going into complexity, it's a lie of sorts. So choose a better one than that it's impossibly difficult, yeah? And don't perpetuate it by these. Let me just get into the pronunciation reel that I have seen lately. It was about the pronunciation of the letter G, like when you spell G, and how you pronounce it. And this is funny because Norwegian has very many words that are borrowed from other languages that contain the letter G. And that's why this one in particular is so problematic in pronunciation. Sometimes it would be pronounced as sh, and sometimes as g. And then there are some purely Norwegian rules for palatalizing it. So that means softening it into a y, like yir or yift, this kind of thing. Yeah. So the y, that's a rule. You can learn that. And let me know if you want to know what it is, or if you want me to talk about that a little bit. Like, when is it that the g softens into a y? That's a kind of predictable, even though with the letter g sometimes it isn't, because if there is the g e combination that would be predictive of that. Sometimes it's a borrowed word, like from English, like gir on your cycle, right? And then it's pronounced as a g because it's a foreign word, right? And we kept the original pronunciation, but otherwise it's a rule. But these things, like when is it sh and when is it j, oh, not j, g, right? I'm confusing English for Norwegian now. It's not really systematic. And that's what this reel was playing on. Yeah? It was like, so how do you pronounce this one? And they had things like genie, like a genius, right? And it's like sh. And students are like, yes, 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 okay, sure. And then they have like genial, and that's obviously related. It's the same basis, right? And students are like genial, right? And like, no, genial, right? And students are like almost crying. And then they go on like two more or three more rounds of like strategy, but for that matter you can say strategy as well. Some of these have like a duplet, like you can say both strategy and strategy. You can say energy and energy. So the sh would be more common in most dialects, but with a few words you actually can choose, right? Then sometimes you cannot choose, it has to be gi at the end, sometimes it's she. And then obviously students are crying at the end, right? This also goes for example, generelt, like in general, versus general, like generalforsamling or something like that, right? So these things, we just have to learn them. There is no system in particular to them. And it is difficult. It is a pain in the ass. You have to learn it. The best way to learn it is first step awareness. You have seen the word, you have it maybe in your vocabulary cards, you know that there is this issue going on, that it could be both, and you have to know which one, right? Step number 2, massive exposure, right? If you do the thing that I always recommend, half an hour plus of Norwegian input per day, you will get used to these things, right? If you don't know the thing about energy, you should just listen to a podcast or two about, I don't know, like energy sources or the environment and this kind of thing, and you will learn it before you know it, right? You will internalize it. You will never ever again stop to think of like, oh, it's energy, but then again it's like, for example, psychology and not psychology. So what's happening here? If you listen to sources that contain these words repeatedly over a longer period of time, if you get enough of that exposure, you will internalize it, and you will never ever kind of wonder about like, this is the same combination and it's pronounced differently. You will just get used to it, right? So this is really what does the trick. It does take some time, but it works. It works every time, right? But if somebody puts all of them next to each other in a reel like that, so you just watch it for 30 seconds, and you can be devastated at the end if this kind of connects to your previous belief that it's impossibly difficult. But what is more empowering? Saying that, oh, the guy is right, I can't do it, this is impossible, or is it maybe more empowering to, I don't know, find a teacher who actually specializes in pronunciation and ask them, teach me, you know? Or maybe there is a free program. Nowadays, there are a lot of these free programs about Norwegian. Maybe somebody is running one about pronunciation, right? Maybe there are some good YouTube channels, and there are some good YouTube channels that speak about pronunciation, right? And you can figure it out. Or you can be like, he's right. I can't do this. It's impossible. Yeah. So again, I'm not saying don't like that. I'm not saying don't follow these creators. I'm just saying take it with a pinch of salt. Yeah. The fact that somebody has taken the work and the time to pick all of these examples, right? And putting them next to each other and showcasing them together, which they wouldn't, of course, occur together like that in real life, right? That doesn't mean that it's a real life problem. A much better strategy really is to go from those words that you are using when you want to say that word and you're like, who? So is it psychology or is it psychology? And you're like, I don't know. So maybe figure that one out, because that's the one that you wanted to use, right? That's your immediate need, and put it on your vocabulary cards. So that's a good strategy, right? Rather than being like, oh, right now I need to wrap my head around all the business with g in Norwegian because this guy is saying that it's super difficult. That's why I have to nail the whole thing. No, you just maybe start with the things that you're actually using, right? And by the way, a good pronunciation tip here: if you don't know if it's psychology or psychology, one thing you can do is actually to just write it into Google Translate, of all places, and it has a sound function. You can play it back to you, right? So just write it in Google Translate, have it play it back to you, and it does reasonably well. Yeah, you need to double check on it sometimes. Maybe you need to ask somebody if it feels weird, but mostly it does a good job, right? It's a robotic voice, but it's a start, and it's much more empowering to be like, I can do this. I'll figure it out. These are the ones that I want to be using, right? Or take that reel that I'm in a way criticizing a little bit, not as such, but this unintended effect that it can have, right? And pick one or two from it and be like, I'm gonna learn these. And you have used the same reel to your advantage. And it's much, much more empowering for you and it's helpful. All right. Okay. So these were my examples. And now the baseline, right? To sum it all up, the thing that I want you to have as your take home message from today that's so important and that I try to teach all of my students to think of every single day when learning Norwegian. And that is something a challenge or it's something I can't because, right? So when you see something like that, what's your overall emotion? Is it like, this is funny? I see that it's a little artificial put together like that. This is not a problem in that complexity I'm actually running into. But I see, okay, this is a challenging point. So maybe I'll pick something here and I'll learn it so that I move a little bit forward. Or are you like, see, this is why Norwegian sucks and why I can't learn it, right? So which one of these is it? Which kind of mindset are you in? And if you're stuck in the latter mindset, then that will be the first step for you to tackle before you can learn Norwegian with that confidence or with fluency or the way you want, right? You can. Everything can be learned. But there is a big but. You first have to believe it, right? You first have to believe that it's for you, you can learn it. And then you will find ways. And maybe you will spend some time doing it, that's all right. But when you have that belief in place that you can do it, when you are not stuck in the I cannot because, like, look at all these pieces of evidence that my socials are filled with because I have liked them before. So now Instagram is serving me even more of this, right? So I'm living in this bubble and I'm having my belief perpetuated, which is not helpful to me, right? All right, so that's the baseline for today. It's a bit of a pep talk, but I think that's just as good for the first one after a long time. And you are also warmly welcome to next week's podcast, or not podcast, next week's live stream. I won't be here completely live. I will prepare it for you beforehand because I'm traveling with my kids because of höstferie, right? But it will run as a live stream. I will prepare a video and I will send it there. So you can still let me know in the comments. I will get back to all of them. I will reply to you. And the topic for next week's live stream will be jumpstart your Norwegian with høstkos. So kose seg om høsten, right? What does that have to do with your Norwegian? How you can leverage that, how you can ride on the wave of like what the autumn brings along, so that you get a jump start with your Norwegian, with your learning habits and all that. So that's gonna be a nice one, I would say. This one was a little pep talky. The other one will be more cozy and some practical tips on what you can do, and I'll show you some of the books that we picked in the library that I think you might like. And it's gonna be koselig, right? So that's gonna be next week's one. You are very, very welcome. Next Wednesday, 3 o'clock, same time, same place. All right. Ha det kjempebra, og vi ses neste uke. Hei, hei.